I'm you from the future. No time to explain. But have you told them about today's sponsor, Aura? I don't. Aura helps protect your information online using such powerful tools as password management, VPN, antivirus software, all rolled into one. They also include a service where they delete your information from data broker websites so they don't have it anymore. Pretty freaking powerful stuff. Data breaches no longer your problem. I don't understand what's going on. Did you tell them that they can do it on an individual or a family plan for a good price every single month? Who are you talking to? What about if they sign up right now? They can get a 2-week free trial using aura.com/Nate Narrates, NATENARRATES. Down below. Use the link. Fantastic. I gotta go. See ya. What?
Something terrifying is guarding the outpost. An aged corpse. He bore heavy wrinkles with dark circles encasing his sunken eyes. Although his mouth was buried under a patchy white beard, it was clear that his lips were paled and chipped. Fatigue was frozen onto his face. He laid upon a patch of sand which stained his loose, muted green uniform. His name tag read Vasquez. Sand. Bundles of sand began crashing onto the corpse, each strike followed by a metallic instrument stabbing the ground. The noises in succession sluggishly formed a tired rhythm. "Hurry it up, Caleb," a voice commanded. Caleb extracted a larger pile of sand and heaved it onto the corpse. Out here, it was quiet. The roar of jets and the chopping of propellers had long dissipated over the horizon of vast sands and wave-like ridges. The sounds of the shovel stabbing the ground echoed off the encircling mountains. As Caleb continued robotically, he decided to name this outpost after a place in his home state, Horseshoe Bend. He thought of this upon noticing how the surrounding peaks boxed the outpost in on 3 sides, much like the shape of a horseshoe. He finished. One would think there was no corpse here to begin with. The sun was now just barely peeking over the western slope of the mountain. "Caleb, you're on guard tonight," the same voice said. Caleb jerked up and glared at him, eyes wide with shock. "Will that be a problem?" The voice was Vince. He towered over Caleb with a dark glare. His crossed arms were like 2 large rodents. Caleb felt as though Vince could tear off his head with his bare hands. Caleb's breathing became erratic, and he could feel the color draining away from his face. As he murmured in hushed, raspy whispers, he signed to Vince. "Did you not see his body? If I go, I'll die too." As Vince began closing the gap between himself and Caleb, the sun sank behind the mountains. Caleb stumbled backwards. He continued to sign. "We don't have a way of winning. We have to leave from here. We go when I say we go, and I will say we go when we find what's hidden here." As Caleb kept backing away from Vince, he noticed that a fellow soldier had been sitting idly amused. Caleb signed to him. "Skinner, please, help me." "I don't speak sign language, bud." Skinner chuckled as he started polishing his rifle. Caleb's back hit a wall. Vince was now in his face. He hunched down to meet Caleb's eyes. Caleb felt frozen in place. There was an unbearable pause as Caleb struggled to meet Vince's eyes. Then, Vince looked to his right. Caleb cautiously followed his gaze. "You see that?" Caleb was unsure of what to see. They were both looking out the mouth of the Horseshoe Ridge. The view was the same as it had been for the past few weeks. No. Something was wrong. Caleb squinted. "There you go. Now you're getting it." Caleb indeed saw. He signed, "Our footprints are gone. That was our last hope. Now we definitely can't find our way back." Chills ran down his spine. Suddenly he felt he could no longer breathe. He collapsed. Sand crept between his nails as he balled his fists in the ground. He thought to himself, "I should never have come. I should never have agreed to this. I'm so stupid. I'm so stupid." As if he was reading his mind, Vince said, "Afraid you got no choice now. I'll only say it one more time. We came here to find treasure. We will leave only once we've found it. You're on guard tonight. If you die, you die." The soft orange glow of the setting sun blanketed the desert. As Vince arranged rations for dinner, Caleb stared at the watchtower where he would be stationed. Its eagle's nest was only a few meters high, leading one to question its utility. However, this outpost was already in such a defenseless position that the watchtower would not have had much advantage regardless of its height. Much like the rest of the outpost, the watchtower was rusted and dusty. By now, generations of soldiers had died for the hopeless purpose of guarding this cursed valley. If bullets from the peaks would not kill Caleb, the westward wind surely would. Caleb thought, as if to reassure himself, maybe I'll get a slightly better view of the desert from up there. He declined to join Vince and Skinner for dinner. Skinner scowled at his plate before poking it with his fork. The potatoes took on the same color as the sand, the last thing he'd want to be reminded of during dinner. The dining room walls looked like concrete, with black stains dripping from long, scattered cracks. There was a single dim, flickering yellow light bulb dangling over the middle of the room by a thin thread. The rectangle table was made of some brown metal and wobbled at the slightest disturbance. At every step on the rough, damp floor, one would feel like they were drowning their feet in grime and mold. These soldiers had long detached themselves from the hazards of unsanitary food. Vince broke the silence. "Skinner, you perplex me." Skinner paused, holding a forkful of potato midway from the plate to his mouth. It was the first time Vince had ever spoken to him. Vince continued, "You joined the army to fight for your country, that right?" Yes, sir. Been my dream like my dad for me." "Then why come with me? You knew we wouldn't be doing anything for our country." Vince took a large bite. While chewing, he went on, "I couldn't have been clearer about our goals, so there's no way you misunderstood me. So what happened?" Skinner fidgeted. He dared not take his bite before answering Vince's question. "You keep eating, Skinner, or your food will get cold." Like a machine, Skinner put the fork in his mouth and chewed slowly. His eyes didn't meet Vince's, but he felt his black stare piercing him. "Sir, with all due respect, why haven't you put me on guard duty yet?" "You feel underutilized?" Whereas Vince's words felt as swift as bullets, Skinner stepped over each word as if they were landmines. "Sir, I believe I'm qualified for it." Vince smiled, and he patted and gripped Skinner's shoulder. Skinner flinched. "Then you're the dumbest goddamn soldier out of the four we started with." Vince took his hand off Skinner and stood up to clean his plate. Walking away from the table, he spoke over his shoulder. "I mean, are you blind? Did you not see what the body looked like? Shit. I should have put you on guard duty the first night to get rid of the dead weight." Skinner clenched his jaw and tightened his grip on his fork. "You're the one who's blind, sir." He stood up and faced Vince. Vince stopped. He turned his head halfway behind. "Don't you see? Something's been guarding the treasure, and Vasquez clearly tried to take it and run. Whatever's been guarding it, killed him." Vince turned around completely. He held a curious expression, but Skinner observed a hint of malice behind that glare. Nevertheless, he continued. "What I'm saying is, you put me on guard duty, and we go together to find it. That way you'll know I'm not trying to make a fool out of you, and we'll have a better chance of getting it." Vince wore a smile. It made Skinner uncomfortable. It appeared timed, as if Vince had programmed it to appear once Skinner stopped talking. He walked up to Skinner and once again patted his shoulder. Skinner flinched. "I really think you're onto something here. Let's do your plan next time. I don't think Caleb is the type to do what you're suggesting, so he'll join us too." He walked away to the bunks, and that was the end of that. Skinner silently stood in the middle of the empty room. Something in Vince's voice deeply unsettled him. It felt as though Vince had offered him a poisoned drink. Moonlight washed over the horizon. An indigo haze descended upon the distant ridges. Caleb stood alert, shifting his attention between the four sides of the eagle's nest. Even as he listened vigilantly, the night was nearly as quiet as the day. Not a single rodent scurrying around. Not a single bird scavenging the dead. Nothing except for the occasional dry breeze. Caleb sighed. Hours passed. He was now lounging on the floor of the eagle's nest. Even if he were to lay prone, his head would still be peeking above cover. No wonder this is such a death trap, he thought. If I die here tonight, at least I got a nice view. The haze had been replaced by the silhouette of a large ridge with the moon shining just behind it. The stars were more visible now. Caleb began counting them, taking note of the ones that seemed to flicker. Some of them are satellites. I can't remember how to tell, though. He tried his best to exude calm, but he couldn't hide from himself the sweat of his palms. Caleb's attention darted towards the west side of the outpost. He was unsure of what sound he would have preferred to hear. He had expected to hear footsteps in the sand, or a distant gunshot. But a door creaking open, and so nearby? That means there's an intruder. He held his binoculars up to his eyes, struggling to see through his shaking hands. He leveled his breathing and scanned the outpost. A gust of wind blew sand off the roofs of various buildings. An object rattled against the column. He paused at one building positioned directly behind the bunks. It was barely visible, but there was a window at the ground level through which he could see a room illuminated by a dim yellow light. He didn't recognize this room. It was unreachable through any doors within that building. Whoever was in there clearly knew the layout of the outpost better than any of them did. Caleb continued to examine the room from his position. Inside, there seemed to be nothing but a large cylindrical brick structure about half the height of an average soldier. It had a circular opening, and within there seemed to be a dark pit. Is that a well? Movement. A small shadow expanded to fill the entire room until all the light from the bulb was swallowed. Caleb was now staring at a pitch-black window. Then, the light quickly returned. Vince stood at the window, staring directly at Caleb. Caleb dropped his binoculars and stumbled backwards. He started hyperventilating in his confusion. Before he could process anything, the moon was blotted out. All the stars disappeared. The mountains ceased to exist. Finally, Caleb could no longer see what was immediately in front of him. He reached out. His hands, too, had disappeared. He was blinded. Tears pooled in his eyes as his hyperventilating turned into silenced whimpers. Needles. Trillions of sharp pricks carved deeper and deeper into his skull. He attempted to scream as he held his head. His efforts were futile. The pain only grew worse. He felt as though his brain was expanding against his skull, spawning an escalating pressure. Yet, no matter how close his head felt to exploding, the pressure kept intensifying. It was as if an infinite number of syringes were injecting some liquid into his brain. A voice rang out. It was a scream. Who was screaming? Caleb was far overwhelmed by agony to realize that it was he who was screaming. It was the first time he'd ever heard his own voice. Vince watched from next to the well. From his point of view, the eagle's nest of the watchtower was imprisoned by a pitch-black void, as if a black hole had swallowed it. The sounds of Caleb's screams reached him. He thought, fascinating. It gave him a voice. The screams grew in intensity. It began to sound like they were furiously rubbing against his vocal cords. He clawed at his face, sinking his nails deep enough to draw blood. He could barely gasp for air. Tears of mucus gushed out. His screams turned into a gurgle. His vocal cords had been viciously torn to shreds. Blood mixed in with his saliva. This pain he was inflicting upon himself was nothing, however. He was driven to the point of pain being a momentary reprieve from torture. 1 minute had passed, and Caleb finally stopped screaming. Not even the softest whisper could be heard from him. Vince watched the black void move swiftly and silently away from the watchtower and towards the bunks. In the eagle's nest laid Caleb's corpse, aged by at least 90 years. His eyes had sunken, and thin strands of white hair protruded from the top of his head like stems of dead flowers. Vince tightly gripped a wooden lid as he observed the void. It didn't take long before Skinner began to scream. Vince started counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. On 5, he slammed the lid into the well. Immediately, the void rushed back and phased through the lid. Vince hurried over to Skinner. He found Skinner convulsing on his bed. Saliva dripped from his mouth as he groaned. Vince wasted no time in shaking him to his senses. "Skinner, I need you to talk. What did it do to you? What did you see?" Skinner coughed amid gasps for air. Vince noticed that all of Skinner's hair had fallen in piles all over his bed. The wrinkles around his eyes and mouth became more prominent. In fact, it looked like Skinner had aged a decade. He finally calmed himself down. He stared at Vince, as though struggling to recognize him. Suddenly, Vince felt a blunt force striking his nose. He found himself restrained. Skinner had put him in a chokehold. When did he learn this? He thought. He attempted to break Skinner's hold, but was only met with an immovable mountain. Skinner growled. I should kill you right now. You're a depraved, sick thing. He tightened the chokehold. Vince, still trying to break the hold, whispered, What did you see? Blood trickled out his nose. The question only angered Skinner further. Despite this, he let Vince free. Amid Vince's violent coughs and gasps, Skinner spoke. That thing, the void you've been playing with? It's not guarding the treasure. There is no treasure. What, you think this is the treasure is the void itself? Vince, although panting, composed himself. No, the void is the treasure. I've been experimenting with it. No, I don't think you understand. There is no treasure. The void is not a treasure to be sought. It is sentient. It is intelligent. You can never open that well again. Vince only grimaced at Skinner in response. Skinner stormed up to him and grabbed his hair. You listen to me. You were dealing with a force so beyond you, it's like an ant thinking it can control the sun. If that's not enough for you, I'll leave you with something else. He let go of Vince and made his way towards the exit of the bunks. He opened the door, inviting Vince to leave with him. In the distance, past the mouth of the horseshoe, the first streaks of blue had sprouted over the horizon. It knew your name, but that part shouldn't scare you. What should scare you is that it knows your name isn't actually Vince. And that was Something Terrifying is Guarding the Outpost by Tmentosyvinnien. Oh my goodness gracious. I might have to just put it up on the screen. Tmentosyvinnien. Tmentosyvinnien. Yeah, I'm just gonna put that up on the screen. I'm just gonna butcher it if I keep trying. Sadly, it was taken down from r/nosleep because you know how that forum can be. They like to be a bit hardcore with some of their critiques, and they'll take stuff down just because. I'm sure many of you have experienced that as well as I've been told. I haven't put anything on there myself, but maybe one day. But luckily they were still polite enough to give me access to the story because they submitted it as an assignment for their college creative writing class. So that was awesome. I'm really glad we still got to read that. This is a cool little story. The fact that it's like so you got an air mystery, you got like a little group of soldiers. I'm pretty sure Vince is also a soldier. At first, I kind of thought he was maybe like a guy, like maybe it was a private contract kind of situation. He had hired these guys to kind of just do some work for them. And that he was just the employer, but I guess he could have also been a soldier. Maybe he's like a higher rank or something like that. It's kind of hard to suss out all the details, but you have enough information here that kind of paints enough of a picture that allows you to establish what's going on, right? You got a group of soldiers. One of them knows what's going on. They're there to investigate and find a treasure. That's what he keeps telling everybody. There's a hidden treasure, and I believe there were 4 of them based on what they were saying. But I wonder if that includes Vince or doesn't include Vince. I believe it would have. But then it's just strange, right? Because so obviously Vasquez was first on guard duty, got destroyed by the void, aged too far. So that's an interesting point. The fact that this shadow creature, void, demon thing, whatever, it attacks their victims in a way. It ages them, kind of like sucking the life out of them, if you will, which is cool. That's the thing we've seen before. Always interesting to see it used because it's just such a haunting idea, right? The fact that whatever you're encountering or dealing with can literally, I mean, it does suck the life out of you. It ages you to such a crazy extent, you know what I mean? That in some cases it kills them, or in other cases it just ages you, but not like 1 or 2 years. We're talking decades at a time. I mean, that's huge. To lose 10 years of your life like that, oh my god, what just flew into my eye? I was trying to talk. Damn it. Sorry. That just hurt. You know when stuff flies in your eye and it just hurts? Yeah, I don't know if that was like a bit of dust or I don't know what that was. Anyway, but yeah, it's a horrifying thought, right? I know personally, for me, that would probably be a big fear. The idea of like something taking literally 10 years of my life away, like that. I memean, that's insane. And then to think it can continue, not just the once, it can keep going all the way. That's insane. You know what I mean? Because it literally it just ends you. That's crazy. So I love the monster. I think that's a great touch. The fact it lives in kind of a well is interesting. So you got some kind of an abandoned outpost. It's in a well, which has a lid on it. And it seems that whenever you take the lid off, then it comes out almost kind of like the rules of a genie or a djinn, how it's like it's contained to a certain thing until it's allowed to come out. So that's interesting. Very, very interesting. And then also we have the awesome little ending hint there where Skinner's incredibly upset and talking about like, you're basically an ant and this is the power of the sun kind of stuff. It's like, wow, that's quite that if that's an amazing metaphor right there. But then you've also got the fact that it's like, oh, and it also knows your real name. It's like, ooh, okay, so there's even more secrets going on. That's exciting. I mean, overall, I really enjoyed the story. It was awesome. It was really fun. I very much enjoyed it. I sure hope you guys did too. Let me know what you want to see next. We'll see you next time. Take care, guys.